I've seen a lot of posts going around about why millennials and younger generations aren't having kids, and it's really annoying me. So I'm going to solve this mystery once and for all. Couple main reasons. One,
What and people, welcome back to Let's Talk About It with Mels. So today we're going to be diving into why millennials and Gen Zs are not having kids. They literally be saying that the birth rate is declining globally. If you're a first time viewer, hi, welcome to the channel. Feel free to leave yourself a comment of your thoughts and feelings on the topics that we discuss. And I would really appreciate if you hit that like and subscribe button so we can grow the community. Okay, let's just get straight into it.
I've seen a lot of posts going around about why millennials and younger generations aren't having kids, and it's really annoying me. So I'm going to solve this mystery once and for all. Couple main reasons. One, money. Living is absurd. Creating a life is an incomprehensible amount of money to us. When I think about having a child, it's like, okay, let's forget about the upfront cost of all the pregnancy things, all of the birth things. Let's just pretend that a child showed up on my doorstep and that he's my child. I could probably afford him or her if he doesn't need to breathe, if he doesn't need to sleep, if he doesn't need to eat, if he doesn't need to learn, if he doesn't need to socialize, if he doesn't ever get sick, if he doesn't ever get injured. I think if he doesn't do any of those things, I could probably afford a couple of cherubs. Okay? But unfortunately, that's not what the case is. They need to live life. Life is unbelievably expensive at literally every turn. It's hard to think about myself existing for a long time. And I'm doing well, mind you. I'm not even trying to do woe with me. Like, I'm doing well. And still, it's absurd. So having children is quickly becoming like a symbol of a high socioeconomic class, which is very depressing, okay? Money. The second thing of why people aren't having kids, we don't have hope for the future. That's the biggest thing. A lot of this depression that we're feeling, a lot of this dread is because we don't have hope. We were sold a bag of goods growing up that's like, this is what life is, this is what's going to lead to happiness, blah, blah, blah. We get through to 30 and we realize that everything we've been told is wrong. Not only has not everything that we've been told wrong, we also don't even have a clear direction into what the future is going to be. So it's not like people can paint the picture of what the future is going to look like. All we're told is that, no, what you've done so far isn't good enough. You're never going to be rich. Also, we're going to replace you with robots literally as soon as possible. So not only are you not doing good enough, we're going to try to get rid of you ASAP. And what the human existence is going to look like when the robots come, couldn't tell you, okay? So it's hard for us to think about literally like 6 months in the future, let alone when we're 60 years old. So thinking about bringing a child into that, where it's like, yeah, hey kid, welcome to the world. Don't know what to tell you. Hope it works out for you. Me personally, I'm just running out the clock, okay? That's what I feel like most of our generation is doing. We're just running out the clock. We're like, it's messed up. Let's just enjoy the time that we get, and whatever's on the other side of that, I guess we'll figure it out. So there's this whole narrative of like, oh, well, people don't want kids the way that they used to. No, people want kids. Most people do. Not everybody, and that's totally fine. Most people want kids. But when you think about bringing a child into this situation, our rational brains are just not piecing it together, that it makes sense. So it's not a choice. People not having kids is a symptom of a disease. And that disease is the existence that we've created and what we exist in right now. And all this isn't even mentioning the fact that building, developing, and maintaining a healthy relationship has become damn near impossible. So when you think about having to find someone or maintain the situation that you're in enough to bring a child into a healthy relationship, it's very hard to imagine, right? And that's, again, a huge problem, the fact that our human-to-human love and connection has been totally corrupted. Again, another massive problem. So you add all of that up, no money, no hope, very hard to find and maintain a healthy relationship, becoming damn near impossible. And where does the child fit in that? So all these posts, why aren't young people having kids? Shut up.
I love an author who gets us. Alicia, you're an icon. While the economy isn't the only reason that people don't want kids, it is a big one. And we're almost at the point now where all of the people who are under 50 who don't currently have children, almost half of them say they never want children. And at the end of the day, this is just a result of unchecked capitalism. We have companies raising prices and not raising salaries, destroying the environment while they're doing so, charging young people hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to school in order to get that job, not providing any meaningful parental leave or support, and then they have the gall to be like, why aren't these people having kids?
So there's this new article out that talks about how birth rates in the US are at the lowest that they've ever been in the entire history of the US. Millennials are not having kids. I think there's a few reasons why that is. The first being millennials are one of the first generations to not have this intense societal pressure from older generations and from their peers to have children. Our parents' generation, which is oftentimes baby boomers, were having kids because nobody wasn't having kids. Like, it's just what you were supposed to do. I don't think there's a lot of critical thinking that even went into decisions like marriage and like having kids, the same way that millennials are thinking about them today. You see people dating for a lot longer before they get married. You see people wanting to live with their significant other to see what that's like before they get married. You see people being married for longer before they even start having children, or just not having children at all. 0 children households are skyrocketing the past several years. And I think this should be exciting and empowering, because long are the days where you had to follow one single path. You had to do the marriage, the kids thing, and settle down and really do that the rest of your life. I think there's a lot of people realizing that if that's not something you want to do, they're empowered to change careers, to travel the world, to embrace a variety of different lifestyles that wouldn't be possible if you have kids. Cost of living everywhere has also just gone through the roof compared to our parents' generation. And so people are being a lot more thoughtful about making sure they can be healthy and live their best lives and do the things that they want to do, and not necessarily be bogged down with the responsibilities of a child. Childcare costs have also skyrocketed in the last few years. So having a child itself, you have to be pretty well off in order to do that. Or that has to be something that you really, really value and really commit to, because you're giving up a lot of things. There's way more I could talk about with this article. It's super interesting. It just came out from the Washington Post this week, so highly recommend you take a look.
Millennials are causing a baby bust. They aren't having enough kids to keep the U.S. population.
And you know what? That's perfectly fine. My generation, the millennial generation, is choosing not to have kids, and the past generations, like the Gen X and the boomers, they're losing their fucking mind over it. But you know what? Us child-free millennials that just don't want to do it, we have a multitude of reasons why we're not having kids. And they being the past generations, they can't comprehend the reasons that we don't want to do it. Like, for one, kids are super fucking expensive. And I feel like the past generations, they're not understanding that raising a kid back then and raising a kid now are two very different times. It costs a lot of money to raise kids. Like prenatal care, doctor's appointments, the hospital bills, and then after the baby's actually born, you have, diapers, food, wipes, clothes, if you have the off chance of having, a special needs child, then that child's going to need extra care that's going to cost extra money. And then, you also have to think about, when they get older, they want to do like activities like swimming, basketball, track, gymnastics, martial arts, whatever. All of that adds up. And I've personally been told, from my friends and my family, how much money it costs to have these kids, and they just can't afford it. But they still have to find a way to do it. Also, the sheer state of the world that we are currently living in with the, overpopulation, climate change, the war with Ukraine, the systemic racism here in America. Like, it's okay that my generation does not want to have kids, and the past generations just need to accept that. Like, there's plenty of people in the world There's not going to be, like, the human race is not going to go extinct because a chunk of us millennials are not having kids, which I feel like that's what they think is going to happen. My God, the inflation rate right now is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Here in Washington State, where I live, the housing market is just ridiculous. I can't even find the words to explain it. It's so bad. And just like the inflation rate overall. I went to the grocery store the other day to buy a thing of eggs. It costs like $9 for a fucking carton of eggs. That is goddamn ridiculous. And you know what? Some millennials just don't want to do it because they just don't want to do it. I being one of them. I don't want to put my body through that. I don't want to put my mental health through that. I don't want to change the way that I am living my life right now. It's not something that I want to do, and it's not something that a lot of people in this generation want to do, and the past generations just need to accept it at this point, because you know what? It is what the fuck it is.
Coming from someone who used to work in a daycare, why are you having kids if you don't parent your kids?
Because a lot of people who shouldn't be having children have children for entirely selfish reasons. The US birth rates are at the lowest they've been since 1979. Most people acknowledge that they can't afford to have kids right now, and those who are having kids can't afford to spend time with them. As someone who's worked in childcare and nannied for the better part of a decade, and I am available if you're in the area, there are two reasons that parents don't spend a lot of time with their kids. And I want to talk about both of them today. First being the state of the economy, but second being this phenomenon we used to refer to as the trophy or the accessory child. Both reasons you could tie to the existence of the patriarchy, of course. But the accessory child is something you'll see more when you're specifically like nannying and working for richer families. Now you see it a lot more in these traditional homes, especially with the women who were born and raised to believe that like their purpose was to birth children, but they don't actually want these children. Or they'll use them as like accessory children, right? So they'll take them out to like the mommy and me and all the fun classes and whatnot. But when it comes to the raising, it gets dumped on us, the nannies. In my opinion, the same reason that men pull higher as wanting children than women do, men don't actually want a child, they want to birth a legacy. But either way, all very selfish reasons where these kids just get dumped in childcare. And then on the completely opposite side of the spectrum, and this is where you'll see it more from kids in like daycare systems and whatnot, where fertility and birthing rates and child rates all in general are just at the lowest point they've been in what, like 40 years? It's because literally nothing is affordable right now. Housing prices are rising 2 times faster than income is. The median price of a home is almost $500,000, and most people can't afford that, let alone adding children into that equation, which the average child up until the age of 18, not even including college, so add another 100 to 200 grand onto this, is about 310 grand. The average cost of childcare for an infant in the state of Minnesota, at least where I live, is $1,300. That's almost half of my entire paycheck from last month. And yeah, the average salaries estimated in all these articles I looked at landed between like $60,000 and $75,000. And if to even qualify for this $500,000 house, before you add on the 20 grand for the child every year, you have to be making like $166,000. But most people are making between like 60 to 70, maybe 80. And then you multiply that for 2 people, both working. That's still not enough for that, plus the child. So what you'll see a lot when you work in a daycare system is 2 people struggling to work full-time and reach that number, and then on top of that, they're simply too exhausted at the end of the day to also be properly raising the child, unfortunately. Because a lot of us Gen Z and some millennials have acknowledged now, we're already struggling to stay afloat all on our own, so it would be really selfish for us to bring a child into this world when we don't have the energy, time, or money. And on top of all of that, now our country's trying to ban access to healthcare that makes it so that we don't have all these children that we can't raise, feed, house, or support. So if that all passes, we're all just going to be going homeless together, I guess.
Why aren't millennials having kids?
Because we are the first generation to actually question whether we want kids or not. We don't simply do it because it's what's expected of us. We've seen the implications. We know that having children is expensive, is a huge life adjustment, and completely alters our current reality. Now, some people may want that. I am likely not one of those people. And you probably watching this aren't either. Let's be real. And it is something that weighs on me, or at least it did last year. because I was dealing with a lot more anxiety and depression and things like that that were causing me to have these recurring thoughts. But now I've let that bullshit go because I don't live my life for what other people think of me any longer. I live my life for me and who I really want to be. Like, for example, next year in 2024, I am going to work on my financial goals with my husband and our 2 cats. Not that they contribute financially, but they take our money. And I'm going to get my shit together because I want to maybe save for a family someday. And I haven't been doing that for these last 8 years of my 20s and of these years that I've been working. There's so much life I have yet to live, and I don't want to be burdened by having children in order to make something different about it or just do what society wants me to do. So in the end, do what's right for you and your life, but don't let society pick that choice for you.
Gen Z and millennials need to start having more kids.
Why do you think?
No! How come you're all lonely with no kids?
Because nobody can afford anything nowadays.
Instead of complaining, how about you apply that energy to a job?
I mean, people can't afford food, let alone shelter. Do you know how high rent is?
So you're saying even with a job, you can't afford any of that? That's a lie because some of you do have apartments.
And the people that are paying it are struggling, so most Gen Z and millennials are opting to live with their parents.
I had a house at the age of 25. So how was I able to buy a house, but you can't?
Because when you were our age, you bought your house for 3 grapes and a carrot. No! It doesn't cost that no more.
See, your generation doesn't know the concept of hard work. None of you want to work. You're all just lazy.
Well, who would want to work in a job in a market so no matter how many hours you put in, you still can't afford a home?
That doesn't give you guys the right to be entitled at your job. You guys are always ranting online about billionaire corporations.
I understand that, but I think everybody's getting angry for a reason. They've been treated horribly, and the answer to being poor is to force them to have kids to make them more poor?
Yeah! It's clear you're not going to change, so we need to ban abortion because God wouldn't want that.
So all of a sudden it's godly talk. Why don't we talk about the economy? Why don't we keep the conversation there?
God would fix all of your generation's problems. All you have to do is believe.
I'll tell you what, instead of all these antics, if you just focused on lowering the cost of housing and rent and put strong regulations against that.
That's a logical response, but since you're too poor to have kids, we'll just change the laws to make you have them. Good luck.
Millennials having fewer kids could be a drag on the economy for the next decade. This may not faze some child-free millennials. Child-free millennial right here. We're using the money that could have been spent on childcare to splurge on lavish vacations, flashy boats, and other luxuries popular amongst dinks, couples who live on double income with no kids. Y'all, I can't believe this propaganda at this moment. Are you kidding me? What millennial do you know has a boat? Who is going on vacations? The last time I went on vacations was a good 6 years ago, unless you want to count a staycation where I stayed at home. I can't with these people. So apparently that kind of spending won't be enough to offset the drag of a shrinking population on the economy over the long run, especially considering that the U.S. birth rate has collapsed over the last half century. The shortage of babies has been particularly acute since the pandy. I mean, that makes sense. Like, why would people want to bring a baby into a pandemic? Like, make it make sense. They talk about shrinking birth rate, blah, 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 blah. Fertility rates down, blah, blah, blah. I'm guessing that's why conservatives are trying to push this whole abortion ban and come after IVF and treatments and stuff, because they really are trying to force people to have kids. Personally, as a child-free millennial, I'm going to stay this way for the rest of my life. I'm going against the grain, okay? Number one, who cares if it's the reclining birth rate, okay? Let it recline. Maybe all of us dwindle down to 0 so we can start over, because at this point, we don't deserve to populate, okay? Unless we get this world under control. There's too much going on, especially in the U.S., okay? We don't have it together here. So why bring a child into this world? All right, that's just personally me and my choice. If you do it, do you, boo-boo, whatever. But personally, I'm going to remain child free. I'm not going to let this propaganda stop me. All right. And also, I forgot to mention in the article, they said that they were going to try to incentivize people by maybe having more housing available, more affordable housing for us, so they're going to have kids. I'm like, y'all need to have that anyway, not just to get us to have kids, have more affordable housing.
Fertility rates are the lowest they have been in a very long time right now. And people are constantly asking, why are people not having kids anymore? Why do women and families want to opt out of having children? What's happening? And let me tell you, there's many reasons people are choosing not to have kids, but the cost of having children is a major factor. There are many families that want to have children that simply cannot afford it in today's economy. So just to put it into perspective, I'm going to show you my daycare bill for this month. Okay, I have 2 kids in daycare. They are both toddlers. We go to a town-based daycare center. It's kind of run by like the rec department. So it's not a center-based daycare. It's not some fancy schmancy daycare. But if you look, you will see that I'm paying just over $3,000 a month for 2 children to attend daycare. $3,000 for 2 children. And mind you, I have 4 kids. And my older 2 need after-school care and summer camps. And that's a whole separate conversation. Now, if you're doing the math, you'll see that's just shy of $40,000 a year, but I do have 4 kids, which means on average, for the last 5 years, we paid anywhere between $50,000 and $60,000 a year for childcare because we are paying for camp and after-school care and school breaks we're paying for care. The cost adds up, and it doesn't go away when they get to school age. And here's the thing. Childcare was always expensive, but it continues to skyrocket. It is one of the fastest rising costs in our country, more than housing, more than groceries. It is skyrocketing. And so families are choosing not to have children because they simply can't afford childcare. And oftentimes they can't afford to leave the workforce because the cost of housing and groceries and everything else that you need in order to raise a child is also insanely expensive. So it is a very sad fact, but many families are opting out of having children right now because they simply cannot afford it.
Okay, you see with this one, I'm not gonna lie, I actually hear about childcare costs all the time, and I always hear how expensive it is. In the UK, I've heard it's about £2,000 a month or something like that. I think it varies from daycare or childcare or nursery, whatever you want to call it. It literally depends on the nursery, but on average, it's about, 1,500 to maybe like 3,000 a month, as I said, depending on the nursery. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've heard, and that is a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like, that is a lot of money just for childcare. And it's just a thing as well. It's a lot of people, that's like their whole salary. Like, do you know what I'm saying? That's literally like their whole salary. So I'm just like, how do they expect people to afford that kind of stuff? And it's just a thing as well. It's just, I know like there's gonna be people that's gonna be like, well, you knew what you was getting yourself into when you had this baby and this, that, and the third, da-di-da-di-da. But it's still a lot. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, especially hearing her figures as well, that what's going on in the States. That's just crazy to me. Like, why is it so expensive? Like, why is childcare so expensive? I just don't get it. Because deeper, that doesn't even include like nappies. That doesn't include clothing, food, anything. That's just for the childcare. That's crazy to me. Do you know what it is as well? I definitely feel women are more career driven nowadays instead of like back in the olden days. I don't even know if I want to say the olden days, but maybe like 30 years ago, if you want to call it, or 50 years ago. I definitely feel like women are more career driven now. Like, they're more focused on their careers than being a stay-at-home mom. A lot of women back in the days, they were like stay-at-home moms. They would cook, they would clean. Do you know the traditional household? But I feel like it's defo changed. It has defo changed over the years. So I defo feel like that defo has a factor into it as well.
A lot of millennials are choosing not to have children for myriad reasons, the most obvious one of which is the economy. But now another reason is surfacing. A lot of baby boomer grandparents are just not willing to help with childcare. Many millennial parents are finding that their boomer parents just aren't interested in leaning into the grandparent role, despite having leaned on their own parents to help raise their Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z children themselves. A lot of them seem to be too busy being retired to bother with their grandkids. But that doesn't tell the entire story, because it turns out a lot of millennials' baby boomer parents are unable to retire and have neither the time nor the money to help with their grandchildren. More than half of all boomers have no retirement savings to speak of, according to 2020 census data. And even among those who do, a Kiplinger study found 22%, more than 1 in 5 baby boomers, have decided to delay retirement because they're worried they don't have enough money, or because they worry the economy isn't stable enough. So even when they do want to help their kids with the grandkids, many boomers simply can't. And with so many millennials and now Gen Zers adding this to their list of reasons not to have kids, it's likely to exacerbate the decades-long trend of declining birth birth rates, which many economists worry will have dire economic consequences. Today's babies are tomorrow's workers, after all. Declining birth rates mean there might not be enough workers and tax dollars coming in to support governments and economies. These problems have been seized upon by those with far-right political and religious leanings, who seek to fix them by curtailing reproductive and LGBTQ rights, and calling upon women to return to so-called traditional wife roles. It should go without saying that forcing people into a certain lifestyle is not a solution, nor is, by the way, limiting immigration, which economists and other experts say is the one factor that could offset all these problems in the United States. So what is the actual solution? Well, creating a country and an economy where inadequate pay, meager taxation of corporations and the wealthy, unstable job markets, and inadequate social safety nets don't create a situation where child rearing is a dismal slog and grandparenting is financially impossible might be a start. Because if the experts' predictions hold true, we've now arrived at an absurd place where even choosing not to have children causes more problems than it solves.
I'm not kidding when I say this, but one of the biggest things I took away when I had children was, oh, I understand why people are child-free by choice now. I'm going to out myself and say that I genuinely didn't understand that, because as a woman, and I don't want to say, like, I'm not ascribing to societal gender norms, but, like, as a woman that grew up with a mom that was a stay-at-home mom and just kind of thought that, I thought that's what you did. You just had kids and that's fulfilling, and I couldn't wait, and I loved babies. And I used to think that there might be that, just like that woman that didn't want that maybe, I don't know, I didn't understand them. And I kind of thought, I don't want to say less of them, but I just thought, like, oh, you and I don't vibe. I don't get it. Why would you not want this? And then as I got older, like, I'm in my mid-30s now and I had kids, I go like, oh, like, those women just really fucking knew themselves. And they are extremely emotionally mature, women and men that don't want kids. But I'm speaking specifically to women because we put that pressure on women mostly. I'm like, you know yourself, you know your limits, you know your boundaries, you are prioritizing yourself, your happiness, your health, and you're not following society's rules. You're giving everyone a big F you, and that takes a lot of courage too. So I have so fucking much respect for, again, women, but mostly women that are able to go against everything that society tells them they should do and just say, no, fuck it, I don't want to deal with this shit. It's a lot. This shit is a lot of shit. So yeah, if you're not, I think if you're not 110% committed to being a mom, don't do it. You have to want it with every fiber of your being, or you're going to resent that choice.
Sometimes I'd be like, damn, I really don't want kids. And then I'd be like, damn, am I really going to find me a man's? Because I know a lot of, like, men want to, like, you know, add to their legacy and their last name and stuff. But, like, I don't want children. I don't want them. I just don't. I don't want to pay for them. I don't want to do all that school stuff. I don't want to daycare prices. I don't want to do that. Like, hell no. I feel like that is, I'm sorry, like a death sentence. I know that sounds very bad, like an extreme, but like I have no desire to be constantly stressed out at all. But I feel like a lot of men actually want kids. But I also feel like a lot of men don't really understand how expensive kids are. Like, and I do. And I'm already expensive as an adult myself, and even as a kid I was. I have no desire in being a mom. Too much responsibility for me.
I'm starting to see a lot of women and men saying, thank God I don't have a baby. I don't want no kids.
Yeah.
Having kids used to be a beautiful thing.
Right.
Now it seems like a lot of people don't want it at all.
It's true.
So I think it has a lot to do with how poor we are as a generation.
Agreed.
And also how free we want to be. And you can't be broken free. They can barely take care of themselves.
That's
so they're saying,
true.
how the hell can I take care of a kid?
Well, of course the birth rate is declining in the UK, and here's my reasons why. So you might have read recently, or even just actually the last few years, the birth rate in the UK is dropping quite steadily. It's now at 1.56 babies per woman. I mean, look at the 1960s. On average, it was 3 children per woman. But even in the 2000s, you know, all the way up to 2010, it was starting to rise again. But look, it's dropping off a cliff edge now. But let's be honest, I'm not surprised, and let's be honest, lots of you aren't either. I mean, if we actually think about it, it's become so much harder to afford children, but also give them the time they need. I mean, if you go back, most families could survive on one income. I mean, that's almost impossible nowadays. I mean, even 30 years ago in the 90s, right? The average wage has now doubled, But guess what? House prices have gone up 5 times. So now families are paying more for housing, whether that's a mortgage or rent. They're certainly paying more for childcare as well, because they've got no one at home to look after them because both parents are working. So they're paying those expensive nursery fees. And of course, we now have that increase in cost of living that we've all seen. And of course, all these factors mean there's less incentive for couples to have children. To be honest, I can't see this data suddenly shooting back up again. But hey, that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments.
By 2050, over 3/4 of countries won't have high enough fertility rates to keep their population size growing over time. The global fertility, or to keep it stable over time, the global fertility rate has decreased from 4.84 live births per women in 1950 to 2.2 in 2021, and is expected to drop to 1.5 by 2100. And the last one I'll read is Japan's population was 124.3 million, down 595,000 people from 2022. And the falling rate equals out to almost 100 people an hour are being lost from their population. Countries are taking drastic measures to get their birth rates back up. South Korea, for example, is considering giving families about £60,000 in cash for each newborn baby that they have. So yeah, there's a societal, social impact, economic impact on the declining birth rates. And I've heard you say previously that you think it's one of the biggest evolutionary challenges we're facing.
I think we're going through an evolutionary bottleneck. So we're going through a period where, it's partly the pill, people, it's one of those issues that sort of attracts just so stories. People will often be quite confident about, oh, it's this, oh, it's feminism, oh, it's capitalism, whatever. I think that the single factor that actually best explains why you're seeing such massive drops in fertility across not just Europe and America, but Northeast Asia, as you were saying, and also actually lots of, like, the Middle East has quite low birth rates. Indian subcontinent has quite low birth rates. Basically, the only place in the world that still has high birth rates is sub-Saharan Africa. So this is basically a global phenomenon.
Why aren't we talking about the declining birth rate more in the UK? I had a conversation with a girlfriend this morning, and it's raised some really interesting points that I want to explore. And I'm really keen to get your take on this, because I don't have loads of mum friends. I have a few, but I'm kind of having the same conversations with them. So I'm wondering if you are too. I personally think that is a very different world that we live in now to what typically our parents are. I'm 27 and my mum's in her early 60s. So just to give you a kind of gauge of the age gap that I'm talking about, mums in their 30s, and then maybe their parents had them in their kind of 20s or 30s, that kind of range. So when I say that generation, that's what I'm talking about. I'm one of 4. I've got 2 half siblings, 1 full sibling. My husband is one of 5. He's got 1 full sibling, 3 half siblings. We're from big families, and basically we always thought we wanted 3 children. I actually had a very traumatic birth, and that is hugely part of my decision to probably only have 2. I also have some serious long-term issues going on with my pelvis that probably mean that my next pregnancy won't be that great. So I've got other deciding factors, but take all that out of it. The conversations with other mums are all around the same kind of factors when it comes to why people don't want more children these days. I think a lot of it has to do with the expectation that we put on ourselves from social media. I haven't been doing that much on TikTok recently because I haven't had the energy, to be honest. And when you are on socials as a parent, and I literally have made this my whole life and business, so I'm obviously okay with it as the most part, but it's good to be able to look at things, right, and say why we feel a certain way about them. You are constantly comparing yourself to be the best mum, the mum that uses no screen time, the mum that gives them 3 healthy, balanced meals a day, cooked from scratch, the mum who masters the sleep, the mum who gets the right amount of fresh air for the child, the mum who does or doesn't put them into childcare. And all my mum friends agree with me. Our societal pressures that we put on ourselves because of socials are just monumental. Parents didn't have anyone to compare to. They just had their immediate friends who they spoke to, but they didn't have 1,000 strangers on the internet who were doing things a certain way. And you only ever see the good parts on socials, right? There's also, I think, the financial implications now, education, holidays, day-to-day living, the cost of living crisis, having extra bedrooms in your home. These are all things that
I feel like you just used to get more for your money, and I'm sure some of you will tell me that is not the case, but that is my perception of things. You used to get more for your money, and people did just used to have more children because the kind of consequences of having more children wasn't as great. And I think now we're taught to expect so much from our lives and taught women should be out achieving things, working as if they don't have children and having children as if they don't work. Consequences for us of having more children are greater. Layer onto that the fact that we seem to have maternal healthcare crisis in the UK as well. These are some of the reasons I just don't think people want to have more children. But I want to know what you think. Why do you think people aren't having more children in the UK? And did you have expectations to have more children and then change your mind, and for what reason?
Breaking news! Fertility rate in England and Wales falls to lowest levels since records began in 1938. Is anyone surprised about this? Because I'm not. And let me put that into perspective. Let me try to give a little history lesson. World War I was 1914 to 1918. World War II was 1939 to 45. This means that the rates in England right now are lower than when there was active wars happening in Europe. Active war, bombings happening in... Right, you get how serious this is, right? Okay. Millennials are not having babies. And let's go through the reasons why. So Professor Melinda Mills, and this is in an article from The Sun, she's a professor at the University of Oxford, said, the reasons for the low birth rate include finding a partner, housing, economic uncertainty, remaining longer in education, and particularly women entering and staying in the labour force. She added, some individuals also actively make the choice to remain child-free. However, there's evidence that postponing having children to later ages, when the partners are less able to conceive, results in an increase in involuntary childlessness as well. Okay, so basically, the government has made things so difficult in this country that people have stopped having children because life is hard enough. Because life is hard enough. The housing is expensive. There's low housing stock. Well, that's what we're told. The cost of living is expensive. Then, on top of that, say you do decide to have a baby, lovely jubbly, the cost of childcare, so nurseries. When I hear about the prices of nurseries, I'm talking about 2,000, 3,000 a month. How? I can't afford that. I can barely afford myself. Yes, women have become more educated. Women are in the job market. Women are absolutely killing it. Literally killing it. So, and there are stats that show that women, when they become more educated, they have less children. But if the environment was more favourable to having children, I reckon a lot of women who haven't had children would have had them. Like, the government needs to do something because this is crazy.
Don't save the birth rate. Let the population fall.
The declining fertility rate is literally the biggest problem in the world. Most people don't really understand why it's a problem, and the only people who seem to talk about it are boomer conservatives. But in general, nobody is really talking about it or explains it because their generation is not going to suffer. Our generation is going to suffer. Now, in all of the countries in blue, they have a fertility rate below 2.0. In Japan, the last time their fertility rate was above 2 was in 1974. Because Japanese people are extremely healthy and live very long lives, it took them 40 years to see this population decline. In Japan, there are 2 adults working for every 1 person over the age of 65 or over the age of retirement. And the rest of the countries are going to follow, with 1 person to 2 people working for every retired person. Right now, for most of these countries, there's about 6 people working for every 1 retired person. In America, we have very productive legal immigrants. The median age in America is also younger than most countries at 39. Like, the average white person is 44, meaning half the people who are white are over the age of 44. The average age of a black American is 35, and let's be honest, that is propped up by immigrants. Older people are not nearly as productive at work, whether it be manual labor jobs like the construction workers you see down the street, or your doctors. Europe is way worse off because they actually have a social safety net. However, their immigrants from the Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan, and Turkey are not productive towards European economies. In fact, European economies lose money on them. The only productive immigrants who are from developing countries are from Russia, Ukraine, India, and China. And also, it looks like all the countries who are classified as developing countries already have or will have a declining fertility rate in the near future. That's pretty much like the worst situation you want to have for a country that's developing. China is going to economically collapse. They're going to have a whole bunch of old people who are not working. The assisted S rate is going to skyrocket in these countries. Since Latin American countries historically followed the Catholic nuclear family model, they may be able to sustain themselves. And the fertility rate will not collapse nearly as fast. But North Africa and Middle Eastern countries, which have historically had strong gender roles, kind of comparable to what you saw in South Korea and China, their population collapse is literally insane. If you guys look at Turkey's fertility map, it's insane. And it just declined to that level extremely rapidly. Hope you guys enjoyed my yap session, guys.
Nobody should be shocked by this news. The birth rates have fallen, and rightfully so. The state of our economy right now is actually ridiculous. And not just that, the state of our society. Yeah, the birth rate should be falling because women have woke up and said, you know what, enough is enough. I cannot be going to work full-time like a man, going to work full-time with your partner, and then coming home and your partner doesn't do much and you are there to look after the kids and feed the kids and clothe the kids and take on the emotional labour and the house duties in the house to clean and cook. Of course the birth rates are falling, like people have had enough. And then politically and economically speaking, it's economically stupid to give birth to children right now. Because children are literally a financial burden. They are the greatest gifts, they are God's greatest gift, but they are also a financial burden. And I don't think that's a bad thing to say. And the people on the news are reporting it and saying, oh my gosh, the birth rates are falling, what should we do, what should we do? Raise wages. Raise the wages. Why is no one being paid enough? There is no money and you're asking for more and more from the UK people. Where is the taxpayers' money going? Guys, look around you. Where's the money going? Because how can it be that before one person's income would sustain the household, but now two people can't do it? It doesn't make any sense. And then we're doing this little tag team of conservative, Labour. They're all at a job clocking off together and going to drink at the pub together. It's the government. It's not conservative Labour. That's how they keep you divided. The UK needs reform. And I'm not talking reform like Nigel Farage. I mean, reform, yeah, we need reform. But reform in a way where the whole country needs a whole change, a whole shift.
I definitely feel like this is a conversation that people are actually being more open about. And they're actually saying how they truly feel. Because, back in the days, women had this stigma. They're supposed to want kids or they're supposed to love kids. They're supposed to want to become a mother. They're supposed to be nurturing. They want to be a stay-at-home mom. All of that kind of stuff. But I definitely feel like there's been a shift in all of that now into the Gen Z and the Millennials where they've actually just been like, you know what? I don't want kids. I actually don't want kids. Or I just can't afford it right now. Do you know what I'm saying? They're literally being more open and honest about this conversation instead of being hushed by people or the stereotype. When people say they didn't want kids and stuff, especially women per se, people will look at them all funny like, why don't you want kids? Why don't you want them? Is there something wrong with you? Do you know what I'm saying? That's what women would get. So it's just a thing where I'm happy that people are being more open and honest about how they truly feel and they're actually assessing the situation as a whole instead of actually just saying, all right, well, I'm just going to bring a child into this world without factoring any other aspects.
The Wall Street Journal recently came out with an article talking about the worldwide efforts to reverse the declining birth rates, and it's really interesting to look through the lens of Europe versus America. We all know that in Europe they have more socialized services like healthcare, paid paternity leave, transportation, and they also incentivize families to actually reproduce. There are tax credits, there are access to cheap loans. There was also an incentive to have zero income tax through the course of your lifetime if you choose to have children. And what they're finding, regardless of the financial incentives specifically for women to reproduce and have children, they still don't want to do it because it's more of a social choice than it is a financial choice. They also go on in the article to talk about the people that want to have children don't care about the financial incentives regardless. They will still have the children. And for people who are on the fence about having kids, the financial incentives don't encourage them to reproduce. Some of the women that were questioned and interviewed in the article talk about they wanted to finish their bachelor's degree, they wanted to own a car, they wanted to purchase a home, and then they ended up getting older and older and realizing that they don't actually want children. They like the stable life that they have built. It's a very similar concept to a lot of women deconstructing the ideas that they don't actually want to have kids. We have just been told that we want to have kids, and we have to be the ones that untangle from that. It's interesting to look at it from an American perspective as well, where in America, they aren't even incentivizing us to have children. They are just stripping our bodily autonomy away. What kind of family planning and family encouragement is that?
So guys, as you can see in a lot of these clips, a lot of Gen Zs and millennials, they're all kind of saying similar things. They're saying the reason why they don't want kids or they ain't trying to have kids right now is basically because of the cost of living. Everything is expensive. And it's a thing where rent prices have skyrocketed. It's insane. Childcare prices skyrocketed. Insane. Grocery prices skyrocketed. It's insane. How do they expect people to afford kids on top of all these kind of stuff? Because if we're just about making it by for ourselves, why would you want to bring a child into this situation and have them suffer with you? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, the thing is, yeah, I get obviously like accidents happen and all that kind of stuff. I hear it. Do you know what I mean? But it's a thing where if you can avoid it, why wouldn't you? Especially if you're young. Why would you want to bring an innocent child into a situation where you're both suffering? And that's the thing. That's one of my biggest fears, is that I have a child and I can't afford certain things for them. And it's just like I have to go by and just say, no, I can't get this for you, and all that kind of stuff. That's one of my biggest fears. Like, I just want to be financially stable before bringing an innocent human into this world. That's just me. That's just my personal preference, and that's not me knocking anyone. Of course not, because I big up all the parents that's going through it right now. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I know parenting is hard. I can see it's hard. I'm not a parent myself, so I'm not going to sit here and talk on parenthood. But from what I've seen, it's a lot. And I give everyone a round of applause on that. But it's just a thing where, yeah, man, I see why a lot of people are holding back on the kids' situation, because a lot of people are just about making it by themselves. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know. This is just a touchy subject. I don't know. Like, because the thing is, yeah, I get, like, the population is decreasing and all that kind of stuff because of the birth rates and stuff. But at the same time, you can't force people to have kids. You actually cannot force people to have kids. If they don't want kids, leave them alone. Literally, leave them alone. But I get it at the same time, because we need the population to increase, or, like, at least be at a good number for the future. But who knows what the future holds at this point? Who actually knows? Let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments. I would really appreciate if you hit that like button, as it helps the algorithm. And I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button, as it helps to push my videos out to other viewers so we can discuss these topics. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!